Today is December the 6th, 2018. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today I am in Oklahoma City at the Devon Energy Center to interview Miranda Childress, and this is part of our STEM Areas and Women Oral History project. So let's start with learning a little bit about you. When and where were you born?
So I was born July 21st, 1990 in Honolulu, Hawaii. My dad was in the military, Air Force. He was a pharmacist in the Air Force. We lived there for 2 years and then moved, so I don't remember it, unfortunately. I do plan to go back eventually. We went from Honolulu, Hawaii to Las Vegas, Nevada. He was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base. And we were there for a couple of years, and then he got transferred to Enid, Oklahoma. And during this time, my mom was a stay-at-home mom with me. And once we were at Enid, I was there for another 2.5 years. And then my mom, once we were there, had my brother. His name's Jared Mackey. He was born in 1995. And then we moved back to Henderson, Nevada, because my dad got out of the military. He remained doing pharmacy just as a civilian. And then my mom got her license as a manicurist. So she worked in a salon the rest of my childhood doing nails. And my sister was born in 1999 in Nevada. And we lived in Nevada up until 2004. And that would have been through my freshman year of high school. And so my mom's family is all from Henderson, Nevada, which is just a suburb of Las Vegas. And my dad's family is all from Oklahoma, in Morrison, Oklahoma. And so in 2004, my parents wanted a smaller place to raise my younger brother and younger sister. And since we had family in Oklahoma, that was the place they chose to move us all back to. And so when moving in 2004, finishing my freshman year of high school, I had roughly 1,000 students in my freshman class, and we moved to Morrison, Oklahoma. The whole town maybe has 2,000 people in it, and so I went from my sophomore through senior year at Morrison High School. My graduating class had 32 kids in it.
Wow.
So it was a big change, and I got to experience the big city life and also the small town life. And because of that, I feel like I could live anywhere. And I liked both. Both have advantages and disadvantages, I think, like anywhere. But I enjoyed it, and we still go back to Henderson, Nevada to visit family on my mom's side. And then most of my family is around the Stillwater area still today. And I have a few family members that are in Tulsa. And so once I graduated high school in 2008, I should back up and mention that my husband and I went to high school together. We both graduated in 2008. We started dating in 2008. And he decided to start a career in the military, in the Air Force as well. And he was stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And so we did the long distance relationship because I decided to stay and go to Oklahoma State initially. And so we saw each other for about once a month for about 4 years and ended up staying together, and it worked out. But in 2008, I decided I was going to go to Oklahoma State, mostly because it was close. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that time. I knew I liked sports, and I was somewhat athletic, so I decided to go the route of sports medicine and enroll as an athletic training major. And so I was an athletic training major for 2 semesters, I believe, and I needed a general science credit. And I picked geology because I knew nothing about it. And I knew that Oklahoma State was a good school for geology. The Boone Pickens School of Geology is one that is very competitive and well known in the area. So I chose geology, and I was lucky enough to have an amazing professor teaching intro to geology. It was Dr. Jim Puckett. And so he had a big influence in me making the decision to switch my major from athletic training to geology. I fell in love with the complexity of the earth, and to try to understand all of its resources is something that really fascinates me, because we use those resources every day, not just in transportation, but oils are used in everything from our clothes to plastics to CDs and things you'd never think of. And so for our society to live as we do today, it's absolutely necessary to be able to use those, find and understand the earth, find those minerals within the earth and understand its complexities so that we can continue to live like that today. And so it fascinates me to be a big part of that. And I am fortunate enough to be able to learn something new every day and develop every day. And that's kind of why I love geology. It gives me the opportunity to do that. Trying to think of the timeline here.
Well, in high school, was math and science one of your favorite subjects?
So science always was. Math was up until I got into calculus. I didn't enjoy calculus. It was a little bit difficult for me. But up through trigonometry, I did really enjoy it. The funny thing is, I was always better at English and reading. But I think I really loved science because it challenged me every day. It wasn't something that came to me easy, and since math and science wasn't something that came to me easy, I think it motivated me to want to learn more about it. And so that was kind of something I always took interest in. But the thing I wish I would have had exposure to in high school was some sort of earth science class, geology. And I'm guessing that because my high school was so small, we just didn't have a specialized science course specifically for earth science. And I think most larger high school programs do, especially now today. But in 2004 to 2008, I don't think there were any sort of specialized geology or earth science class. So I had no introduction into the subject around my career today, and I wish I would have, because then I would have gone into school not falling into geology. I would have had some knowledge of it before. And that's kind of why today I have a passion for volunteering whenever there are opportunities to share geology or get involved with any kind of STEM program. And speaking with high school, middle school age kids, I really, really do like doing that. And to know that STEM is having an effect on those ages now and it didn't before, to see that difference is really exciting. So.
Well, besides Dr. Puckett, did you have other favorite professors?
Yes. So besides Dr. Puckett, my graduate school advisor, Dr. Michael Grammer, has had a huge influence on my success. And so once I became a geology major and decided that was the career path I wanted to take, you can sort of pick which path you want to go down within geology. And so you can do hydrogeology and study water systems, or you can do oil and gas, which the Boone Pickens School of Geology is really well known for. Or you can even go into the mining industry. And so I chose oil and gas because of the reason I stated earlier. And in doing that, I knew I wanted to work for an oil and gas company, which would require a master's degree. And so my senior year of undergraduate school, which would have been from August 2012 to December 2012. I decided to take a graduate course as an undergraduate student because I wanted to sort of make sure that was the path I wanted to go down, because it's a 2-year commitment once you enroll and get accepted and everything. And I didn't know where I wanted to do my master's degree at that point, but I thought, well, it'll be a good start to enroll in the graduate class, and then I'll kind of have an idea and know what I'm in for. And so that class happened to be carbonate depositional systems, which was Dr. Michael Grammer's class. And so I reached out to him and I said, I'm an undergraduate. I'm scheduled to graduate in December of this year, and I'd like to know if it's okay with you if I just go ahead and enroll and get a feel for what graduate coursework is like. And he welcomed the idea. He signed off on it. And there is where I learned I had a fascination for carbonate sequence stratigraphy, which I can get into that in a little bit, which is what his research was mainly focused on. And he had actually just started at OSU that year. And so he was new to the Boone Pickens School of Geology. He had funding and he was looking for students. And he happened to be teaching this subject that I was really fascinated and interested in. And so while through taking his class, I was talking with him about research ideas and projects that he might have available that I could work on. And so I went ahead and took the GRE, the exam required to enroll in graduate school. And I was looking at other schools at the time too. So because I wanted to have an emphasis in oil and gas, I was looking at the requirements for OU and for Kansas and for Texas, but I had never applied quite yet. And then I finished taking Dr. Grammer's class, and then formally went through the process of applying at OSU to become his student and start work with him the following year. And so that's why I ended up getting my bachelor's and master's degrees from Oklahoma State.
So you finished your bachelor's in what year? 12?
So my bachelor's I finished in December of 2012, and then I started grad school that following semester, so January 2013, and then I finished in I defended my thesis in April of 2015, so technically I was a spring 2015 graduate for my master's degree.
Did you have an internship anytime during that?
Yeah, so the Boone Pickens School of Geology has several oil companies come in and interview students specifically for internships, and that's something that is a great opportunity for graduate students, because not all schools have that. And a lot of graduate schools require the students to go to student expos in other states and cities to interview for positions like that. And we were fortunate enough to have those companies come in to OSU and do that there. So once you start grad school, they have you submit an application to the office, and the office distributes that to the oil companies that you'd like to apply to intern for. And then eventually those companies will go through your application and then either select you to interview or not. And so once you're selected to interview, you're interviewing in the fall semester for an internship the following summer.
Okay.
And so I was interviewed by several companies, and Devon was the one I ultimately chose to go with. And so I started my internship in the summer of 2014. And so based on your internship performance through that summer, you have the potential to be offered a full-time position pending you finishing your master's degree the following semester. So I interned in 2014 and then was fortunate enough to receive an offer. I accepted the offer and then continued school the next fall and spring semesters, which would have been the fall of 2014 and the spring of 2015. And then once I finished and defended my thesis, I immediately started at Devon. I think it was like 1 or 2 weeks right after I finished school. And so I lost a thought.
It was meant to be, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But it was kind of a cool experience for me to have moved here in 2004. I was able to see the Devon Tower being built, from a distance, and then I sort of fell into geology, and then I knew I wanted to go the oil, the oil and gas route, and then I see this awesome Devon Tower being built, and so once I knew my career path, working for Devon was sort of always at the top of my list. And so I feel really fortunate to have the opportunity to have interned and then received the offer and then be here today.
I'm wondering if, when you were explaining to your parents that you were changing career choices, how that went.
My parents have always been big supporters of me and the choices that I make, and their main concern was that I just get a college education. And I think they always had faith in me that no matter what I chose, I would be successful at it. Because I always felt like I had their support, no matter what I was doing. And so I felt confident enough in changing my major, and they supported that decision. And it's kind of funny because none of my family has a background in oil and gas at all. And so you tell people you're a geologist and they kind of just look at you and ask you, so do you just look at rocks all day? It's like, no, that it's a little more complicated than that. And I'll kind of try to give a general description so that they can relate to it a little bit and understand. But so now I've had a few years here at Devon, so my family has a pretty good grasp on what I do. But at first they were kind of like, okay, so you're going to study rocks, but now they've made the connection between why I look at rocks to find the resources we need to use in our everyday lives. So yeah, I always did have their support. I feel so fortunate for that.
So this is probably a good spot for you just to go ahead and tell us on tape how you answered that question. What does a geologist do?
Yeah, so in the oil and gas industry, an exploration geologist's main task is to identify areas where you have an economic amount of oil or gas, whatever fluid your company is looking for in particular at that time. And so typically today that's oil. And so I'm tasked with mapping the subsurface, so mapping the layers of rock that you can't see based on previous data that we have from vertical wells, mapping that in various ways and trying to understand whether or not those units are a reservoir, so if they have sufficient permeability and porosity to hold fluids, and then work with the engineers to figure out a way to drill economically and get that out of the ground.
So with mapping, do you do GIS, that sort of
thing on
the side?
So Devon actually has their own GIS department, and they do a lot of the surface mapping and helping us understand what acreage we have available to go drill in. And so they will put together maps for us that describe what companies own or have leasing rights to which sections, townships, and ranges. And they help us understand within our area of interest that we've defined as a geologist which areas we can legally go into and set up a drilling rig on and get those leased in the right way.
So would you have to go out into the field to get some of?
So usually the landman is the one who will go out into the field, and typically it's set up like that we have landmen who work in the office here, and then landmen who work in the field, and they do a lot of the courthouse record work, and they'll look through those and then go out and actually knock on landowners' doors and make them various offers about leasing, or see who owns what and see if the records are actually right and things like that. So I don't ever have to go out to the field to find that updated information, simply because of the technology that we have today. The opportunities I get to go out in the field mostly have to do with while the well is being drilled. So it's after that initial phase of making sure you have your rig set up and the land leased. The geologist's main job is to make sure that the well stays in zone. So as you're drilling a horizontal well, you have a top of the zone defined and a base of the zone defined, and it's my job to make sure that that well stays in that zone based on different trajectories. And we have well logs that have certain signatures that we read as the well's being drilled to determine which area we're in. And if we need to make a change, we'll work with the engineer to make that change, and the engineer will talk to the guys in the field and implement that change if need be. And then there are also a lot of opportunities to go out in the field while your well is drilling because cuttings come up. So drilling mud cycles through the well, and as the well's drilling through the rock, that cut up rock has to go somewhere. So the drilling mud floats it up to the top, to the surface, and you have mud loggers on location who collect samples of the rock that we've been drilling through, and they describe it. They look at it under the microscope on location out in the field, and they call us and tell us what they're seeing and if they think we're in zone, and then we'll make the final decision on whether or not we think their interpretation is right, or if we need to make a change again or anything like that. So often we'll go out into the field and communicate with them face to face. And then also you can do a coring job, which instead of only cuttings, which is just the broken up rock that you've drilled through, you can take an entire cylinder of rock as a sample and extract it out of the ground. So you have a whole cylinder of rock that you've drilled through with a special bit to not tear it up. It'll come out whole, and then they'll pull that up out of the ground and lay it down, and you'll be able to go out in the field and look at that right away before they package it up and send it to the lab for various tests. And so you'll be able to have an opportunity to go oversee those things and make sure that the testing that you want done is being done correctly. And so there are a lot of opportunities to go out in the field, but it's not required of us. And so I have been to the field a few times, but day to day, I'm mostly just in the office.
Okay, so just to describe a typical day then for us.
So a typical day for an exploration geologist working for an oil and gas company would be to come to work, and usually you'll check the calendar for meetings. If you have a well that you're in charge of in drilling, typically you have to watch that not just at work but all night long too, because wells never stop drilling to go to sleep. So it's almost like you're on call, and so you're constantly getting updates from the field, and depending on how fast you're drilling, the faster you're drilling, the faster you'll get updates, because they're usually like every 30 feet. You can specify how often you want to receive an update. And so usually you're kind of up in the night checking to make sure that you're in zone and things are going well and you haven't crossed a fault or something. So that's one task that a geologist could have, where they're sort of up throughout the night, and then in the office as well, monitoring those wells. And so if you're on a well or drilling a well, you'll usually start out the morning with a meeting with your drilling engineer to talk about the previous night, how far we've drilled, if we're still in zone, if we need to make plan changes, and then we'll give our team an update on all of that progress that we've discussed with our engineer. And then the other sort of part of it being an exploration geologist would be that if you have a project and you're mapping, you aren't necessarily in charge of a well. So that's more of a normal 9-to-5 job. So you would come to work and you might finalize your mapping and then put everything in sort of a presentation form to go present to your leadership. Because at the end of the day, if you have outlined an AOI or an area of interest and you know the depth at which the rock is that contains the oil that you want to go get, and you know you have an estimate of how much that's going to be worth once you get it out of the ground, you have to go propose that to leadership to get it funded to go forward. And so you would have to not only prepare all your maps, but put it together in a format that leadership can read and understand and be able to say, yeah, this is economic for Devon, or really, we don't think that that's something we want to go after. So if it's something they do want to go forward with, you would start well planning with your team of landmen and engineers and GIS. And if it wasn't something they wanted to go forward with, you would put it on the shelf or save the idea for another time when oil prices might be higher and it might be more economic, and start something new and start trying to find the next new thing.
It's not your responsibility to find the new thing, so that comes from somewhere else, and then you check it out.
Sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it is your responsibility to find a new thing. So when I started at Devon full-time in 2015, I started in the Anadarko Basin, and there I was given a project that had already been started. I was there for 2 years, and then I rotated into exploration new ventures. And there you are tasked with finding the next new thing. New ventures is solely based around trying to find new areas that we haven't drilled in, and put the economic case together for leadership there on that.
So that's where your math comes into, I guess, right?
Yeah, and even in drilling the wells too. Every time you make a plan change, that involves trigonometry, and you have to understand the well trajectory, where you're at and where you want to be, and how fast you're drilling and how far you've gone. Ultimately, that forms a triangle, and you have to do the SOHCAHTOA measurement, right? And come up with a plan to give your engineer to take to the guys out on location to make that change. So there is some math involved.
Yeah, I'm assuming some of it's computerized though these days.
A lot of it is, and so you might have to do a basic measurement like that, but once you do it, you can put it into the geosteering software, and it'll show you if you made that change, this is what your well would look like, and you can adjust that then from there and say, no, I want it a little higher, a little lower, and sort of visualize what that looks like.
Well, in your first one that you mentioned in the Anadarko Basin, were you? I'm assuming you were supervised.
Yeah. So the way it's set up at Devon is you're usually on a team of technical staff, and then there's a supervisor and a manager. And so the manager's above the supervisor. And so they kind of work together to make sure projects are on track and that work is being updated correctly and that we're in communication with the engineering team on drilling wells and finding prospects and things like that. So there is some direction given by supervisors and managers.
Well, in a team like that, what would be the ratio of male-female? Just curious.
Um,
Just
here it's probably out of 10. There's probably I would say it would depend on which group you're in. There are probably maybe 4 out of 10. So
not
2
bad.
to 4 out of 10. It kind of just depends where you're at in the company. 2 to 4 are women and 10 men.
Are there other women geologists doing what you do?
Yeah. So
That's
there are
exciting.
several here throughout the company that work in the different basins that some primarily do drilling the wells and some primarily just do more of the exploration type work. And some do both. Again, it kind of just depends on which basin you're working in and what your project really is defined as.
Well, back in grad school and undergrad, in your geology classes, were there many young ladies in your
No,
classes?
there weren't. So I can't give you a specific number, but I know in undergrad there were multiple classes where I was one of 2 females among about a class of 30. And then in grad school, that went up a little bit actually. And so there were about 4 of us in a group of 30 that were female.
It didn't deter you.
No, it didn't. It didn't. It made me, I think, more passionate to want to get, just get education out there and inform people of what geology is and what we do, because at the time I was in school, most students were in geology because it was what their family had done, or they had some sort of family history of somebody who was in the industry. It was very rare that somebody not know anything about geology be a geologist or be on the career path to be a geologist. And so I think that, in combination with the fact that there are just not a lot of females in the industry, motivated me to want to become a geologist and just get the word out there that, hey, this is a really good profession that females can be a part of too.
Were there many female professors?
No. The majority of professors were males, at least at the time I was in school at OSU. So there were, by the time I left grad school, there were 2 full-time professors teaching courses out of probably 2 out of 8, maybe.
What would you guess is the reason for that? What would you think the reason for that would be?
That's a good question. I think maybe just going back through the history of a geologist. Back in the day, early 1900s, geology was primarily being out in the field and mapping physically.
Mm-hmm.
And no technology that we know today was available. And so being in the outdoors and having to camp out and hike and do a lot of the physical hard work that was required of a geologist at the time, I think society didn't view that as a feasible job for a woman. You know what I mean? And so through time, with developing technology and sort of a change in the trend of society, it made more opportunities available for females to be involved in that type of work. And so I think that as the years go on, even from now, we'll see more and more females.
Well, I would think some of it could be too. Part of it would be guidance counselors aren't even suggesting it for women or men.
Right.
I guess for young ladies or young men.
Yeah.
Educated.
Right. It may have just been something they didn't even recognize as an opportunity or know. Or know about to begin with.
What is the biggest hurdle, do you think, in what you do? I mean, and there's something that's got to be challenging to you that you've had to work extra hard at. Well, maybe not.
Oh yeah. I think dealing with constant change has been a challenge. You know, in the oil and gas industry, a lot of the changes are due to the price of oil. And so there can be a lot of reorganization or changes in groups, or even sometimes layoffs is a thing any company experiences. And so being able to sort of overcome those changes and still come to work and create value every day is something that I try very hard to do, no matter who I'm working with, what my project is in, or what part of the business I might be working in at that time. So I'd say overcoming change is probably a big one. And then just something personal for me is public speaking. So like I mentioned earlier, if you have a project that you want to get funded and push forward and be able to go drill wells in, you have to present that to multiple people. And it starts out with presenting it to your own team. And you have to present it to your specific manager. And then if he approves it, you go present it to the guys who are in charge of funding. And so you're doing a lot of public speaking and presentations. And that's something that it's a skill I've developed through grad school, was where I sort of overcame. I'm a natural introvert. And so I used to be extremely uncomfortable with it, enough that it was visible to the audience that I was uncomfortable presenting. After grad school, I had done it so many times that I figured out how to deal with that, so that outwardly my audience didn't know that I was uncomfortable publicly speaking. I was still nervous inside, but I figured out a way to sort of overcome that. And now it's not a problem, but I still get nervous when I'm presenting, giving updates. You know, we have town halls that are not just our technical staff group, but our whole business unit. So all the engineers, all the landmen, all of the geologists, everybody will come to that. And then if your group has something to show, we'll have to present it to that entire audience. And so I'm very thankful that I went through grad school and developed that skill set, because it made me an effective communicator, which is not something I was before, and it was something I had to work hard to become. And so that was just a personal challenge that I had.
Is the town hall just within the company, or is it out in the town?
No. So town halls used to be over at the Cox Convention Center. We would all go over there as a company. But then there are smaller town halls with just groups by basin. So I mentioned that I was in the Anadarko Basin. So that's our, like, everyone who works the Anadarko Basin would go. And that's internal. That's just in one of the conference rooms on the other side of the building.
Do you know why they call it town hall? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I don't know.
Kind of like a forum when you're trying to sell the city on something.
Yeah, I don't know the history behind that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a team. What would be, tell the various players within that team?
Yeah, so usually the team will consist of 5 geologists, and you all will have an area, a larger area, and then a couple of you might pair up within that 6 or so team and work separate projects within your area. And then once you sort of pair up with somebody to work an area of interest, you'll then start working with the engineering team, who will be on the same floor as you typically. And so you'll pair up with a couple of engineers, and then usually one landman. And so in a normal case, you would have about 2 geologists, 1 engineer maybe, 1 landman, give or take a person in a specific discipline. So you might have a team of 5 that's going to present something to get funded.
Is the landman usually a man? Or is that just
No,
a term that goes
here
with?
I would say it's probably about a 50-50 female-male ratio, at least in the groups that I've worked in. So.
And then when you said you were putting in a well, then you would get updates during the night. Would they come text or computer or phone calls or
It
what?
depends on your preference, and it depends on how you want to work with the drilling engineer. So some drilling engineers don't like texting and just have a preference to call you on the phone. Some work it out where you have just a group text, and it includes not only the geologist and the engineer, but also the guys who are out in the field, um, taking the updates to physically make the changes to the well at the well site. And so in that way, it's more instantaneous on the conversation going on and the changes that may or may not be implemented. And then outside of phone calls and text messages, there is a system that tracks your well as it's drilling, and it measures all the different components of drilling fluids and cuttings coming up, and it's live and constant. So you can have that up all the time and see how deep the well is, or if they're tripping out to change the bit, the piece on the end that actually drills the rock, or if there's any kind of technical issue with the drilling equipment, you'll see that on there, and that's all live feed stuff. So that is something you keep on and you pay attention to, and it will notify you that something is changing or wrong, or that you need to get a hold of the engineer. So that's the point where I'll call the engineer and sort of try to work that out.
So keep on computer. Is that on the computer, laptop, or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Too much going on.
There's
Miranda.
a lot going on. Yeah. And usually it works out where you're not trying to map a specific area and present that to leadership if you're drilling wells. If you're drilling wells, that's like your main task, and that's what you focus on, so you're not spread too thin. And vice versa. So if you're trying to come up with a new play and you're presenting that to management, you're not going to be preoccupied and overburdened with the responsibility of drilling a well. So usually we separate those tasks. But you might do both in your career, just at separate times.
For those who might not know, can you get a short definition of play?
Yeah, so backing up one step, it starts as a prospect. And that is an area that you've defined and you know it has economic resource in the subsurface. And so it's a potential area. A prospect is a potential area where you know there's resource and you might go drill it. It becomes a play when you actually start developing it and drilling the wells and extracting that resource.
I'm assuming those are the terminology. You learned that before you even got here.
Yeah. That's it's geology is a lot of terminology. There are a lot of specific terms. My graduate research work was around sequence stratigraphy, and that's nothing but terminology. And so it's basically strata are layers of rock within the subsurface, and stratigraphy is sort of the study of the composition, the relative age, and the distribution of strata of rock within the subsurface. But the sequence stratigraphy part of that is understanding Earth's historic sea level changes. So we know when sea level has risen and fallen throughout history, and we can actually use that as a time reference, a time framework to predict cyclicity within the strata. And so ultimately that gives you an element of predictability in understanding reservoir heterogeneity or the complexity within the strata in the subsurface, and understanding the various porosity and permeability levels of that strata, which is what allows fluids to flow through the rock. And trying to piece all of that together in one when you can't see it with your eyes is quite a task.
How did you choose that as your
Yeah,
topic?
so I chose that once I had taken that graduate class as an undergraduate in the
So,
fall of 2012. And so that specific class went over carbonate sequence stratigraphy a lot and sort of predicting reservoir heterogeneities both vertically and laterally in the subsurface um, is a tool that is very valuable once you start your career in oil and gas. And so Dr. Grammer emphasized that subject and taught us a lot of the uh, foundation of that knowledge in that course.
what was your? Well, you said trig was your hardest course.
Actually, it was probably Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 in college. Those were the ones I struggled with the most. But
And which did you like the most?
all of the geology classes. My favorite geology classes, though, were the very first one I took, Intro to Geology, where you're just learning about some of the like foundational aspects of geology, really what geology is built upon, and sort of the common physical processes that we're more familiar with and that we see every day. And then I really liked all of the carbonate depositional systems classes. Um, those were really cool.
Well, if you were talking to a group of like high school students these days, what would be like the top several skill sets that you would tell them they needed to be familiar with, at least looking at if they wanted a job like yours?
So it's funny that you ask because 2 weeks ago I went and did career day at my old high school, Morrison High School, as a geologist, and so I put together a presentation that sort of outlined what a geologist does and what you kind of need to be one. And really, um, I think this applies to any job. I think you need a hard work ethic. Because of a lot of the changes that are associated with the oil and gas industry. You need to be able to come to work every day and be motivated to work hard and create value for the company in what you're doing. But specifically for geology, you have to be a team player, and you have to be able to work very closely with engineers and landmen and even the marketing team, because drilling for oil and gas goes through so many phases that start at well planning. Really, it starts at finding the resource in the subsurface and then planning the well and then drilling the well and then extracting that resource from the ground and then getting it out to the various markets. And so, in following all those steps, we don't do every single one of them, but the geologist is involved in every single one of those. And so, you have to really understand how to work with different personality types and not not you don't have to know intimately their work, but you have to have some knowledge of that. And I would say a lot of it is just learning as you go. You probably only learn 50% of what you really need in school, and once you get on the job is when you really learn the nooks and crannies of what being a geologist is about. And so I would say those are some of the things that you kind of need.
Well, and all of those are gender non-specific. I mean, it could
Exactly.
be any. Well, from a female standpoint, is there anything different that you would tell them that they need to be considerate of?
Yeah, when you go out to the field, is it's different, and it sometimes feels a little uncomfortable, um, because you're around a group of men who are only used to being around other men.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, when the the drilling team and the rig hands are out on location, they're there for months at a time, just drilling well after well after well. And so it's very seldom that they have a female come out onto location um, and interact with them. And so sometimes that can be a little intimidating, that you're the only female there. And as a geologist, when you show up on location and you're in charge of the well, you have final say in the decisions that are being made. So if you want to change something that they've been doing in what they consider the normal way for the past few days, and you want to change that, sometimes that's not extremely well received. And so you kind of just have to be tactful about the way you approach them and communicate with them, and feel them out a little bit before you dive into making major changes.
Well, how do you learn that set of skills?
The hard way.
The hard way.
There's really no recipe for
trial and error.
It's trial and error, really, it is. And the good thing, though, is usually I will go on location with another geologist, and typically that geologist is male. And so whether it be me telling my partner, hey, you should tell this guy that he needs to make some changes, or, let's approach this guy together and propose a new way to do this. So there are ways to work around it.
And the more times it works, the less you have to do that,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yes. And you build relationships with them too, because you often talk to them on the phone and things. You talk to your mudlogger on the phone, and you get to know them, and they understand who you are as a person, which helps. It always helps when you're more familiar with somebody, sort of changing the way they do things once they sort of know you a little bit and are more comfortable with you.
Well, and they know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That can't hurt.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't talked about this, but I want to just a little bit. Being a new mother.
Yeah.
On the job, how has that been as a female? Not necessarily working here, you're just a working mom in general.
The first thing I will say is that being a working mother is not easy. So Mila was born August 3rd of this year, and I spent 10 weeks on maternity leave. And so from the time she was born until she was 10 weeks old, I spent every waking moment with her. Got used to being with her all day, every day, all night even. And then your 10 weeks or 12 weeks or however much maternity leave you want to take rolls around. Then you go from seeing your child all day long to only seeing them a couple of hours in the evening before you go to bed, really. I mean, you wake up, get them ready for the day, get out the door, drop them off, and then you pick them up, but there's really only a couple of hours left that they're staying awake before their bedtime. And so that change was extremely difficult for me to get used to. And the first week back at work was extremely difficult, just in trying to focus on work and the task at hand, and not worry about, Mila and what I was going to do later, and trying to be in the moment was extremely difficult. Once that first week passed, we got into a routine, and since then it has gotten a lot easier. We sort of have a way we do things every day, and typically she's a happy baby, and thankfully we were blessed with a baby that sleeps at night, and so when you're getting sleep and things, that's always helpful, but it's definitely challenging, and it's really just something you don't quite understand the difficulty of until you do it, until you're a working mom.
Well, did your career play into the decision as to the timing when to have?
It did, yes. So my husband and I got married in 2012, in the summer of 2012. So it was the summer just before I finished my undergraduate degree. And so I'll back up a little bit. The capstone course for geology is field camp, where OSU's field camp is in Colorado, not far from Colorado Springs. It's in Canyon City, Colorado. So it's sort of the south central part of Colorado. And you're there for 6 weeks, and you're up in the mountains hiking and mapping and measuring with, it's kind of like the old school way, and you're creating these maps and taking tests on what you saw and things. And then after that 6 weeks, you come back and finish up your classes. And so I had field camp the summer I got married for 6 weeks. I finished field camp and got back, and 2 weeks later got married. And mostly it was because Will was still in the military and he was going to be deploying to Afghanistan that following year. And then I knew I was going to be, at that point, I knew I was going to start grad school at the next year. And so we only had a small window to get married. So we got married in July of 2012. And then I started classes that following August. And then went and finished my bachelor's degree that December. And in that time frame, we had bought our first house together and moved in, and it was a house that we decided to flip and redo while we lived in it, which I would not recommend for your first year of marriage. But we did it, and it was successful. It paid off my student loans. Mm-hmm. But it was a test to our relationship together, and just learning how to live with somebody and work with them on this construction project. It was difficult, but we made it through. And so then I forgot what your original question was.
Did it play into your when the timing of having a
family? Okay, so at that point, we both knew we weren't ready to have children yet, because I wanted to at least have a year in my career before children came. So not only so we got married, but I still hadn't even started grad school yet. And so then that's 2 more years. So 2 years later, I finished graduate school and then started at Devon. And I would have been at Devon for 3 years before we had Mila. And so I wanted to get a couple of years under my belt, working as, not working as a mother at first, and just sort of establishing my career a little bit, which both of our parents were pushing us to have children much, much earlier. But I had the mentality that, I worked very hard in school and put in a lot of time and dedication into something that I was able to achieve, which was get a job at Devon Energy. And I didn't want to start and then have to take a bunch of time off to raise a child when I'd worked for 6 years to get here. I want to at least spend a couple of those working and seeing what it's like, making sure that I really did take the right career path and that I loved what I'm doing. And then so just this year, really last year, we decided that it's probably the right time to have children. And my husband just started a PhD program at Oklahoma State, and so we know we're going to be here for several more years, and things are kind of steady right now. And I mentioned earlier we have a schedule, so it works out nicely to, it's just kind of, it was the right time for us to have a little one. But having sort of a career path did have an effect on when we wanted to have kids.
Well, and from what I understand, this company is pretty supportive of such things too. So.
Very much so. Yeah, there's actually an entire set of rooms dedicated to breastfeeding. If you return to work after maternity leave and you wanted to continue to breastfeed, you can freely take breaks whenever you want to go do that in like a private setting. They even have lockers and refrigerators and sinks and everything for you to store your equipment and all of that. They offer, we have a gym here. I'll walk you through. It's on the other side of the building, but there are special trainers employed at the gym that offer specific classes for you through your pregnancy. So at all stages, so early on to late to even after you have your child, they know specific exercises you can do to help stay in shape while you're trying to have a child, and maternity leave, and even paternity leave. So you can take them, the dads can take 2 weeks off, and then we can take up to 12 if we'd like. And so this is an environment that's suited. If you want to if you want to balance having a career and being a mom, this is a great place to do it.
That's good. Family oriented.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about any of the other things that the company's doing as far as STEM goes?
Yeah. So there are a lot of opportunities provided to us to get involved with the community and volunteer. And because I was not introduced to any of my specific career path choices, I didn't have any knowledge of geology. That motivates me to want to spread that knowledge to those younger kids. And so there is one opportunity called STEM Buddies, and it's a once a month deal where you volunteer to go work with a student that's either in third, fourth, or fifth grade for 30 minutes at Mark Twain Elementary, which is just a few miles west of here. And the teacher sets up the project, but you sit down and work with them on various science or engineering projects, little experiments, and you just kind of give them a little view into what it's like to work at Devon, and they get to know somebody from Devon. And usually at the end of that, they get to come to the Devon Tower, and we'll eat lunch with them, and they get to tour and stuff. And so reaching out to those children is really, really rewarding, to see them sort of develop through the year. Even though you're meeting with them only once a month, you can see the excitement that they have for the different experiments, and just getting to know you and becoming friends is really, really cool. There's another opportunity every year. In the summer, SWASU holds it's called SAGE STEAM Camp. And so SAGE is Southwestern Alliance for Girls Education. And then the STEAM is the sciences, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics.
Art's in there. Okay.
Arts is now in there. So that change was made just this last year. Previously, it was just known as STEM Camp. And so that camp is solely 8th grade girls who they have to submit an application, and they're selected from various schools across Oklahoma to join in on this camp, which is a week-long camp every summer in June. And one of the days they come to Devon, and they tour Devon, and then they go through various stations to learn about the disciplines that you can start a career with here. And so I will volunteer for that as a geologist and give a presentation over what it's like to be a geologist at Devon. And then I'll volunteer at the rock table. So we have rocks and minerals set out for them to hold and touch, and we'll tell them where they came from and why they're important to the industry and where you might find them and things like that. And then they go through other stations as well that involve IT and automation and even some robot displays and stuff like that. And they'll be exposed to some of those things too. And so usually once it's over, we'll have like an ice cream social where we can just talk to them freely and hang out with them and answer any questions they might have about starting a career in the STEM fields. And so that's really, really cool to be a part of as well. And then I always try to get out to high schools and elementary schools, just even if I know a friend that teaches there or has an opportunity to come and talk about STEM or geology or any of the above. It's always fun for us to reach out, and it's really nice. Devon supports that, and so if you need to go there on a work day, it's welcomed, and you're encouraged to do so.
Are you involved with OSU in any aspect for helping recruit?
So there are opportunities to go and interview students. So I mentioned that oil companies come and interview the students for internship positions.
Mm-hmm.
So usually alumni that work at that specific oil company will come. And so usually it's somebody affiliated that. So from Devon, we had two OSU alumni come and do the interviews, but they were geologists at Devon, so that was a pretty cool connection. But typically, that opportunity is given to more of the senior managers and stuff like that. The guys and ladies who've been here a lot longer will get to go do the interviews from their schools that they came from. So maybe one day I would love to. I think that would be so fun and cool.
I'm thinking that OSU has WISE, isn't it? Women in Science and Engineering, I think. And they have weeks on campus where they do similar things with high school girls.
It might be. I'm not as familiar with that one.
Okay.
So, sort of some other organizations that are not necessarily just directed towards the younger children is there's Women's Energy Network, which is not limited to oil and gas. It's any energy industry. And so that is an opportunity, again, provided by Devon. They pay for us to be a member of that group. And it's a nationwide group, WEN is, but there are chapters within different states. And so there's a greater Oklahoma chapter. And sometimes they'll have after-work events in Oklahoma City or Tulsa that you can go be a part of and basically just get to know other women in the STEM fields that are a part of the energy industry and sort of develop your leadership networking skills and find a mentor. They offer mentoring opportunities. And then as a subset of that, we have here at Devon a PTP circle, so Petrotechnical Professional Circle, which is just women, specifically at Devon only, will get together every month and talk about, usually it's a specific topic given to us ahead of time, and it just allows us, again, for more mentorship and career development and just getting to know the other women across the company. There are a couple of really useful podcasts and things. So one of them is provided by the HBR website. Harvard Business Review website has a Women at Work podcast there that I believe there are currently 2 seasons of various episodes, and so we'll go through those and listen to them prior to our PTP circle meeting, and then discuss the specific topic at the meeting for 30 minutes or an hour, just generally and informally. Like, for example, the November one was learning or understanding how to get constructive feedback from your manager for your year-end review. Oftentimes, women are sort of caught in an uncomfortable situation with their male manager or advisor in a situation where he might not feel comfortable with providing them with constructive criticism or giving them ways they can improve, and will sort of just get by with a general statement of, well, you're doing great, keep up the good work, but not giving any specifics out to help develop them. And so it was just a discussion around how you might sort of pull those things out and ask for that constructive criticism and feedback so that you can, continue to improve and develop as a professional. So that's just one example, and the subjects kind of vary like that. There's also another really helpful podcast, which is called Skimmed from the Couch. So SKIMM' from the couch. And that's a group of women who interview fellow women CEOs of companies and sort of just get their perspectives on how they climbed the corporate ladder and what they did to be successful. And a lot of those are STEM fields. So that's another one that we utilize. It's really good to listen to. So those are just some of the resources that we're provided with here that sort of help to contribute to our success.
Well, you mentioned mentors. Did you have one assigned to you when you came?
Not specifically. So all of the mentors I have just been informally in trying to grow relationships just by somebody you might work with on your team or somebody you might sit next to in the PTP circle. And so one impactful person, she just retired this year, but her name was Gail Riggs. And she actually started at Devon, I believe it was 25 years ago, which is very rare for a geologist to stay at one company that long. And so she had a very, very long and rewarding career here, and knew sort of the ins and outs of the company. And I had an opportunity to be on her team for a year, where she, again, that was just an informal relationship, but she was definitely a mentor and helped me develop some skill sets that I keep with me today. And we still talk, and she still comes up here for lunch, and we'll sit down together and talk about life or careers or whatever it is, you know. So it's always really, really nice to have that available to help you develop.
So 25 years, doing my math, that was back.
Yeah. She would be a great person to interview for this. So I could definitely give you her contact info because she experienced a whole different level of sort of the society, you know, trying to say I can when society is telling you no, you can't, kind of a thing. So
your generation hasn't had to do that as much, at least not in this field. That may have been other ones, but
exactly.
not in this one.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to not have had that influence in my career path. You know, in school you would read about geology through history, way back to when geology first developed, and all of the scientists named are men.
Mm-hmm.
But if you dig a little deeper, there are female geologists back in like the, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s that put a stamp on geology. And actually, there's one that's my particular favorite is Florence Bascom, and she was the first woman to pursue a PhD in geology at Johns Hopkins University in the early 1900s. And she had to sit behind a screen so that her male classmates didn't know she was there. So I couldn't imagine having, and then she went on to be the first female hired by the USGS, so the United States Geological Society. And so I just tried to ground myself with remembering things like that and not taking for granted the opportunities that I have now, that were made for me by the women back then, sort of paving the way for opportunity that we have.
Well, do you also feel a little bit of pressure of doing a good job so that you don't ruin it for someone else?
Yeah.
Some other female wanting to break into the field.
Right. Yeah. Always trying to I would say that there's a significant amount of pressure, and I'm sure that varies based on personality. I know I hold myself accountable for leaving a good impression in every group I work for, because there are so many changes in this industry, and you do rotate in and out of groups quite a bit. When I leave a group, I want to leave it with a lasting positive impression so that when the next female rotates in there, they're welcomed. And I want to know that I did everything I could to open that opportunity for them if there's any way to do that.
And you're consciously thinking that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You've done really well.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun here.
What do you anticipate for the next 10 years?
So I'd really like to. So I've only been here for 3. It'll be 4 in April of 2019. So I'm still very early on in my career, but I want to continue to develop my skill set so that no matter what changes come or what life changes I have that might change my career path, that I can be successful no matter what. I try to set a goal for myself. A daily goal is to learn something new every day and be able to apply it throughout my career. So as long as I'm coming to work and I'm learning something new every day, I'll consider myself having a successful career path, because I feel like that's something I can use and take and go forward with.
So what did you learn today?
Today, let me think.
It's not over yet.
It's not over yet. No. So I'll back up again a little bit.
Okay.
I described the role of a traditional geologist, whether it be you're drilling a well or you're mapping up a prospect or a play. This year, it was around May when I officially rotated into a new group, which I'm currently in now. And it's a multidisciplinary group that we're working to provide business solutions to some of the other geologists and engineers across the company. And so that involves working with, it's one person from each discipline. So I'm the geologist, there's an engineer, there's a data analytics person, there's a IT person, and there's a data management person. And so this has exposed me to other sides of the business that I previously never had any. I knew of them, but I didn't know what exactly they did and how it affected my work as a geologist, that being the data side of the company. Mm-hmm. And so now that's my team, and I work next door to these guys who are heavily involved in some of the data formatting. And so we're basically behind the scenes providing ways to automate data input and output for the geologists and the engineers to use, so that they, instead of coming in and reformatting the data they need to make their interpretations, they can just use the tool that we've built to automatically make their interpretations. So they automatically have this data available to them. And in this industry, there's a mass amount of data that we use every day, that is stored here from previous wells that have been drilled, and that's what you use to map your area out. And so understanding where that data is and how it's moved from area to area and using it in the various platforms, it often has to be sort of massaged, if you will, mm-hmm. and reformatted. And that takes a lot of time from the geologist, and it's not extremely valuable. So we're allowing them to skip that step and go straight into their interpretations rather than having to mess around with data cleanup. And so that has been a really different role for me the last year. It's not a usual opportunity, and I took it because I wanted to develop my skill set in other parts of the business. So I didn't want to be limited to only the typical tasks of a geologist, but I wanted to understand how what I do as a geologist is impacted by the data pieces that I don't see every day. And so that's made me more of an effective leader, because I'm essentially reaching out to other geologists and saying, what kind of problems do you have with your data, and how can we fix them to make your time here more efficient? And so this is just a rotation. So I will rotate out of this group and back into more of the technical role that I described to you earlier, just more surrounding the mapping aspect of the job. But so right now I'm in that role, and so I'm constantly learning new things about IT and terms I never knew before, and just understanding the various platforms that you can use. So as a geologist, the most common one for our company is Petra, and that's the software you use for mapping. But there's also one that's called Kingdom, and you can work alongside the geophysicist with that, which they work with seismic data. And you can do your mapping in that while they do their seismic interpretations in the same platform, and you can see changes made live to the project, and new geosteering softwares when you are in charge of a well, and getting that data automatically populated into that platform. And So I've really expanded my horizon this year, and then I'll jump back into the more technical role next year.
And you can choose to do that, or could you have
So
passed on the opportunity?
you're asked for your opinion. Usually that happens at your year-end review. You'll go over the prior year's goals and tasks and whether or not you met them and how you're doing and where you could improve. And then they'll ask for your feedback. Well, where would you like to go, or where do you see yourself going, or if a position opens up in this area of the company, would you be interested? And so you give them feedback there, and then they usually, it's usually around January or February when they sort of sit down with you after your review is submitted and everything is finalized. You'll sometimes you have more of an input, and sometimes you don't have as much of an input if a new business unit gets an additional rig and they have no geologist to run it, that's like a major necessity where somebody will have to go and fill that spot. So in cases like that, you might not get as much say, but they do ask you, and it's documented, and so you do have some say. And so I was asked to be a part of this, and chose to do that. So it's been very different, and I can say that I benefited from learning those different parts of the business, but I also dearly miss the technical skill set, that I got to use prior, for mapping the subsurface and coming up with ideas and plays and ways to start drilling more wells.
Sounds like it's almost like a second master's if you're switching gears and learning something totally different.
I've been able to. I've been really fortunate. I feel really fortunate to have the opportunity. But yeah, it's.
Well, how would you learn some of that? Just from them, or would you have to do some look up journal articles and learn on your own?
Both. And it's kind of up to your own personal learning style. But we are also, our team only consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are only 6 of us total. And so we see each other every day. We work really collaboratively and closely every day. And so there are multiples of us on projects. And so there's never one person doing one thing. And so you're constantly learning just in your interactions with them. It's a really interesting way to work because the rest of the company is set up like geologists work with geologists and engineers work in the engineering hallway. And once your project gets to a point where you have to push it forward, you'll go and reach out to the other discipline and work with them. But the way we're working from the interdisciplinary perspective from the get-go, from the very start. And things get done so much more quickly when you have the mixture of people that you need right off the bat. And so I think it might be a good way to integrate groups going forward.
So teamwork is an important part of all of this. It sounds like, as well as keeping up your own end of the deal.
I would say it's almost foundational. Mm-hmm. Because you can't be an effective geologist by just sitting in your office and doing work yourself and never, because once you start collaborating with people, you constantly are talking about new ideas or ways you can edit your current interpretation. And science is constantly developing, and there's never one right answer, especially in what we do. And so it's good to have other perspectives and knowledge areas, about what.
It sounds like you don't have much downtime either.
No, there's not much downtime. There's usually always something going on, and which is another reason I really like the job.
I'm thinking between here and home, you're probably constantly thinking.
Yeah, the weekends are very much appreciated. Are our time, to kind of just rest, relax, catch up on sleep, and be with family and my daughter is really nice. So those are something I do not take for granted.
We should probably ask that. What do you do for fun during
stressful
work day?
So
You hunt, I think, don't
we
you?
do, yeah. We like to bow hunt, and that was something that I was introduced to by my husband. So his family is all really big hunters, specifically bow hunters.
Men and women part of the family, or are you one of
No,
the few?
I'm the only one
Okay.
who who partakes in that. And so really we primarily hunt as a food source. And so I won't hunt anything that I don't like to eat, which includes like duck and geese. I don't, he hunts that and I will eat it, but it's not my favorite thing. And so I'm like, I'm not going to contribute to more of that because I don't want to eat any more of it. But we do like to deer hunt a lot, and that's probably my favorite. And so that's runs from October 1st through January. And so this year we've taken a bit of a break from it just because Mila was born in August. And so most of my time is around her, and she certainly can't go out and hunt. So next year we'll probably pick it back up and get more involved in it as she gets a little bit bigger and we can get a sitter or something. But yeah, so we bow hunt. We do hunt with shotguns for different bird types like quail and pheasant. That's a lot of fun. And so we'll do that. That's usually the December time frame. So that's going on right now. And outside of hunting, I was fortunate enough to have interned with another female geologist who also got a job offer and who happened to have her baby a month after mine. And we were friends before, and our husbands were friends before. And so they have a little one just like we do. And so we'll get together with them a lot because you find yourself in an interesting situation when you're the first one in your group of friends to have a kid. Your priorities change and your interests change, and it's sometimes difficult for friends to understand that you can't stay out as late and you aren't as flexible on your time schedule as they are and as you were with them prior. And so it's really nice to have my friend here who is going through the same life stages, and we can go hang out with them and our kids can play together. And so we'll hang out with friends and we'll go eat with them, and that's about it. We hunting is probably the primary like hobby that we do. We also like bowling, and we were in a bowling league last year before we had Mila, and then we'll probably start one up again next. Usually that runs through the summer, so we'll probably start one next summer and do that. That's a lot of fun to do with friends, also friends that work here. So.
Well, then you said you could do exercise here.
Yeah.
So that could be part of your daily, fit in your day, work day.
Yeah. And so they call it the well. And so it's a small gym, but it has treadmills and ellipticals and cable weights and everything you can think of. They also run classes during the lunchtime, during the hours before work, after work, and at lunchtime. They'll usually have some sort of class that you can get involved in, whether it be like a core class or just a jogging class. Sometimes they'll go out on nice weather days to the park across the street and work out there and then go back in. But it consists of a full set of showers and lockers and everything that you need to get back ready for the workday if you were to go in at lunch and do that. So, and they refund. So you initially pay for your monthly membership, but if you go at least 5 times that month, which isn't hard, they refund you. So it doesn't cost you anything as long as you're going, and you just badge into it. So it's really, really convenient and nice.
Kind of hard to do before or after work if you with the little one.
Yeah. So before I had Mila, I would go after work because you can work a few sets of shifts here. You can either work 7 to 5, 7:30 to 5:30 or 8 to 6. And that's a 9-hour work day. You have an hour break for lunch, so you're working 9 hours a day. And then you get every other Friday off. So every other weekend for me is a 3-day weekend, which is really, really nice. It's worth the extra hour of working during the week. And so I would actually come in at 6:30 a.m. and leave at 4:30 p.m. And that was primarily for the traffic situation because technically my address is a Guthrie address, and that's because Will is doing his PhD in Stillwater at OSU. And it's about halfway for him to have a 40-minute commute north and me to have a 40-minute commute south. And so I would just go to the gym right after work and then stay there through the major traffic hour. And then by the time I went home, the traffic had subsided quite a lot, and it wasn't a big deal. But now I sort of I want to spend as much time with Mila as I can, so I find myself skipping the gym and just going straight home to be with her. And so as she gets older, I could see myself getting back into it, but mostly I'll just work out at home while she's there with me or go on walks with her. Or now it's getting a little cold for that though, so probably have to find in-house workouts to do, But
I'm thinking she's in good hands if she wants to be a geologist. You can
yeah,
tell her all about it before she even gets to sixth grade.
That'd be exciting. Who knows?
Well, what advice would you give a young lady that was contemplating something in the STEM area?
You can do it, and we're provided with the opportunities to pursue any kind of career that you want. And so I think as long as you work hard and you set your mind to something, don't let anybody ever tell you can't do something, because you can.
And I think I would add that you could change your mind if you don't like one.
You certainly can change your
area,
mind.
switch it to another.
And I have friends who are geologists that work with me today who changed their mind years into their college education. Mm-hmm. They went for 2 years and then decided to switch it up, which is unfortunate, and you do lose some credits, but what's 2 years compared to the rest of your career life?
Right.
If it's a change that's going to make a difference in your happiness for the rest of your life, then I would say it's worth it no matter how long you've been in school. And I've also had friends go back and decide that they like more of the business aspect of the company and go get an MBA because they find a different career path through initially being a geologist. And so there are many opportunities to change and make changes, but as long as you have some idea of where you want to go in the moment, you can get there. You just work hard at it.
Do you anticipate doing a PhD yourself at some point?
I do not. Absolutely not. Solid no. That takes a special person, and I don't think I could ever go back to school at this point and enjoy it. And so I'll back up a little bit and say that by the time I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2012, I knew the job I wanted, which was this job that I have today. But I knew that to get that job, I had to have my master's degree. It was a requirement. And so I knew that if I took a break and did something else for a little bit, I would never go back, because I'm not the most intelligent person IQ-wise. I had to work very hard in school to make good grades and be successful in getting that internship and doing well. And so graduate school was a struggle for me. I did well in it, though. I dedicated a lot of time and effort into it because I wanted to do well, but it did not come easily to me. And I learned and developed many skill sets through my master's degree, and I would never take it back. I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. But I wouldn't say that it was my favorite thing, and I don't think I could ever go back for a PhD. And I have a certain amount of respect, an extreme amount of respect for the professors who do that, or who have done that. As a part of my master's thesis, next year I'll officially be a published author, because my advisor and I submitted a chapter of my thesis to an AAPG memoir. And it was accepted and it's been edited, and that was one of the most rigorous processes that I've ever been through. Just editing it back and forth and getting perspectives on it, and coming up with the idea and formatting the whole thing and submitting it multiple times. I have a newfound respect for professors who have to do that multiple times a year and publish all the time. It's not something that I could do. I'm so glad I did it, because now I'm gonna have my name out there as a first author on a research paper. That's probably to date one of my proudest, or one of my most valued accomplishments. I would say for now.
Work wise.
And so I was really happy with the opportunity to do that, but I don't think I could ever go back and do it as a career for a PhD.
But you'd be great in the classroom.
Yeah. In the classroom portion, oh yeah. I love learning, and as a part of geology, you get to go on a lot of field trips. Because we spend so much time trying to map units in the subsurface, things we can't see, we'll often go to outcrops and look at the strata that we can see, and use that as an analog to compare to what we think we're seeing in the subsurface. And so that's one way we can make that connection. And so there's a lot of opportunity to go on field courses and field trips, not only in school, but also here at Devon. Even though I have an office job, we take one class a year that's in the field. And sometimes that's in North America, and sometimes it's in Ireland or Spain for a week, where you'll go look at outcrop analogs to what you're mapping in the subsurface, and try to make that connection, because you'll be able to visibly see things in the rock that are there in the subsurface. You just can't see them because they're covered up over millions of years of time.
Kind of like continuing education.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, Devon puts a big emphasis on that, and so it's nice to always be able to sort of fine tune your knowledge, because once you leave school and you get into your career field, there's some things that you forget, and so to kind of come back to that foundation of classroom work or field work is really valuable, I think.
Well, then on that same line, how would you keep up with the latest? Keep that in that way, that respect, by those classes, or were there other ways to keep up with the latest, greatest thing?
In the oil and gas industry, the way you keep up with the latest and greatest is through AAPG publications.
Okay.
So the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, and they put out new articles every year, published by various scientists across the nation, or across the world, really. And so you can read about new technology being developed and how it's being applied, and new hypotheses and new projects, and different things they're doing around the world. Another way we do that, we keep up with the latest and greatest, is through conferences. And so AAPG will put on conferences. GSA puts on conferences. Many organizations do. It's usually a once a year thing. And you'll go to, usually the city changes every year. They do it on a yearly basis. Sometimes it's in Houston. Last year it was in Salt Lake City. Usually it's in a larger city. And so you'll go with all of the oil and gas industry community. Anyone who wants to go, who's a member, can go. And so Devon will, if you wanted that to be your yearly course or your trip, they'll pay for you to get there and pay for any kind of classes you take as a part of it. But you'll be able to actively network with other professionals in the industry, and understand what's new and what sort of the flavor of the year is, if you will. So
that's good too. And that would be an opportunity to interact with other females.
Yes. So it's at that time, often at those conferences they have specific female events, whether it be a lunch or a talk given by a female geologist who's won an award for something she's accomplished. They'll have her come speak or something like that. They have those types of events. I haven't been to one in a couple of years. I've opted for the field courses. So yeah. but they are really good and full of opportunities to develop.
So, do you know what your career goal is at this point since you got here and got the job you wanted? Do you know what you might aim for next?
So I want to get back into developing my technical skill set, because by technical skill set I mean mature my mapping techniques and um, working on creating new prospects and just becoming a better geologist specifically. And so that'll be my immediate next thing. You know, at the end of my career, I have no idea what that looks like right now because I'm only 3 years in. Um, but as long as I can just have a positive impact for the company I work for and feel like I'm creating value in some way, I'll feel.
Well, are there different ranks like a junior,
Yeah.
senior geologist or
Yeah.
whatever, so you can
So
aspire for that?
every company is different, but right now at Devon there are 6 levels.
Okay.
So you can go from a Geo 1 to a Geo 6, and every time you move up, it's considered a promotion. And so at the end of my career, I'm at the top of that career ladder. That will be a success for me.
Okay.
So
And have you any idea about how long it takes to get from?
a long time.
Does it?
Usually you'll move through Geo 1, 2, and 3 relatively quickly. And then the 4, 5, and 6 are longer. You need like 20 years experience to get to the top.
Well, did the lady that you mentioned earlier, did she get to the top
I
rank?
don't know her technical role or her technical title, but she was a top geologist at the company.
Okay, well that could be.
It could be. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've covered a lot, Miranda. Is there something that I don't know to ask that we need to cover?
We have covered a lot.
Technical, your career, why geology? 2020 women on boards. Something about Devon has that going to where they have 20% of their board members are women.
Do they? I don't know specific. I mean, I think I've generally heard about that. They want more.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Do you have to well, it's probably not your role to with the controversy about fracking and all of that. You don't have to deal with that yourself.
I don't know. So
we don't have to talk about it if you don't have anything you want to say.
No, it's not. It's all taken care of by other groups.
That's what I figured. They had someone that was specific for that. And then I was reading that Devon's core values: always do the right thing.
Yeah.
And be a good neighbor and team member, and deliver results. So I think just for listening to you today, you can check off all of those.
Yeah, I want to check them off, but I want to continue to keep doing them. I think that's the key to feeling like for me to feel like I'm successful, I need to keep doing those things continuously.
Yeah, and you may know something about their STEM grant program where they work with teachers.
Yeah, so one thing I forgot to mention was that I'm on a committee for judging proposals for funding for certain STEM projects, and this goes from middle schools it goes all the way from middle school to high school age kids. And so schools from the Oklahoma area will submit applications and describe their ideas for STEM development in the classroom and propose funding they'll itemize items that they want Devon to fund for them to develop their students' learning in STEM. And so every year we'll sit down as a group of, I think there's 6 of us, and we'll go through, usually I think there's like 11 final applicants that are given to us, and we'll go through them and rank them and see who we think has the best idea for STEM development and what sounds the most unique and cool. And then we'll vote, and then they'll decide how to divvy up the donation to that school to be allocated to that project. It's really, really awesome.
Can it be from across the state, or does it need to be in the Oklahoma City area?
No, it's across the state.
Across the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about what's the most unusual place you've been to work for work. Yeah, strange or unique or whatever.
I would say it was probably in the middle of nowhere, Midland, Texas. And that was for a core job when we were removing core from the ground. And myself and another geologist went out there. I mostly went as a learning experience. It was a couple of years ago. And he was a seasoned geologist, a senior geologist, and he walked me through the process and things. But it was out in Midland in the Permian Basin. And so you fly into the Midland airport, but it's like a 2-hour drive from Midland, just in West Texas, to get there. And it was at night. I had flown in and I was driving to the well location at night. And in Midland, when the sun sets, all you see out in the middle of nowhere are wells. And, wells burn off their gas production with the flame.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could see just nothing but little flames all over, like every mile section, as you were just driving down the rural roads of Midland. I couldn't even tell you the nearest town name. I've forgotten it already. But that was probably the most unique place so far. And I'm sure that, farther down the road as I get into my career, I'll experience more unique places.
But you have that image in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain smell?
Yeah,
that you would recognize
when you get on location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it smells like oil. Mm-hmm. Really, is what it is. There's just heavy machinery, and
so there's sounds that are
it's very loud. Yeah, you often have to wear earplugs when you're walking around the rig. But if you're there for a weekend for a core job or just working with the mud logger, identifying cuttings, you're staying in a trailer on location, and so the rig never stops drilling, and so it's a very, very loud environment. It takes some getting used to if you're familiar with it.
I would think some other safety things you'd have to wear
there is a whole before you can even go out there, you have to take a safety course and get certified for the year every year. To be certified to go out in the field, and it can be given in person. Sometimes it is here. Oftentimes it's just a course you take online through Devon, and you go through the rules and regulations and how to remain safe on location. That's something that Devon takes very seriously, and there are a set of rules and regulations that you have to follow before you can be out on location. So that includes fire protectant clothing. You have to buy special clothing. FR gear is what they call it. You have to wear a hard hat, eye protection. Depending on where you're at on the rig, you have to wear hearing protection. You have to have a gas monitor on your. It's like a little yellow, looks like a little GPS remote, and it hooks onto your collar to make sure that you're not around hydrogen sulfide and other hazardous chemicals. If you are, an alarm goes off and just notifies you to get away from the area. You have to park a certain way when you get on location, like you have to back in so that to decrease the risk of hitting somebody upon backing out and leaving. So you have to make sure you back in, and you have to be very adamant about checking in and then checking out if you leave to go get something to eat or whatever, so that if an emergency happens, they know who was there and who to search for if something significant happens and stuff like that. They have tests done. When I was there, they did it weekly, where they'll, just like we would practice a fire drill, they'll practice a drill to gather together in a safe area if something goes wrong. And so they'll set off a specific alarm that signals everybody to stop what they're doing and then, safely evacuate to the designated area. And you usually go through a safety meeting when you get there. And so there's a lot of protocol that goes into remaining safe on location. Something Devon takes very seriously, and not just on location, but even here in the building. We go through multiple rounds of EHS training and things to sort of stay in tune and up to date. Usually our meetings start with a safety moment, and that will involve an experience somebody had over the weekend on I had a fire in my kitchen, or I was trying to drive safely down the road when somebody was texting and almost hit me, and here's what I did to avoid it. And usually around the 4th of July, people will have fireworks safety protocol tips, or grilling season. If you're cooking out, they'll have tips on that. And so usually we'll open up every single meeting with either a safety moment or a brief talk about how to get to the fire escapes or the fire escape routes. So,
okay, how tall is this building? It's 30.
I don't know. I know there's 50 floors in it.
That's what I mean, floors. Okay,
yeah.
So there's 50 floors. Okay.
50. And so on floor 50 is the restaurant. There's a restaurant up there called Vast. So you have a really nice view of everything up there.
About how many employees are in the building? Do you
I
have any
want to
idea?
say it's around 1,400. Used to be a lot more.
Well,
The
ebbs and flows with the
stock market, basically.
With the stock market.
Oil prices, yeah.
Oil prices. Mm-hmm. Well, I know there's lots of wells everywhere. And,
yeah.
5 years ago there weren't as many. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I drove out toward Hennessy and noticed there's quite a few.
Way more. Yeah.
It's been a couple of years since I'd been out there, so
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That and wind turbines, and you got something to do wind.
No, we don't. But there are a lot of them out west.
That's what's under.
Yeah.
That's what's under.
Yep.
All right. If there's nothing else, I will ask my last question.
Uh-oh.
How do you want history to remember Miranda?
I would like to be remembered as somebody who has left a positive impact on the business, and I think that can look differently in a lot of ways. But I think being remembered as someone who came to work, gave it their all, and left creating value for the company would be a positive thing for me to be remembered by.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that. We can say that from your experience working in our office. You did great.
Well, thank you.
And you're doing great here, sounds like. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with me today. It's been great.
Absolutely.
Round 2.
So when I first started in 2015 and I was working in the Anadarko Basin, that group currently has quite a few female geologists. When I rotated, there were probably, in the Anadarko Basin, there were probably 4 or 5 of us, which is a lot. And then I rotated into New Ventures Exploration, and there were none. There were women who I worked with in land and as geotechs, but no other geologists were women in that group, except for Gail Riggs, the senior geologist that I mentioned was my mentor. Her and I were the only female geologists. And then rotating into this new group, the multidisciplinary group that focuses on data organization, there are no females except for myself. So depending on which group you transition in and out of, that number goes up and down, but I've never worked with more than 4 other females in one group. And I would say 4 females is a lot, depending on which group you're in.
Well, are there very many female engineers?
Yes, there are quite a few female engineers.
So more of them than there are.
And I think that's a more popular career path for females to take. And I think it's just because there's more of an emphasis on that and availability to engineering education in college.
Sure.
And I think right off the bat, a lot more people are familiar with engineers than they are with geologists if you just ask the average person.
Yeah, I would agree. That seems logical to answer it that way. Okay, that it?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you again.